believe that Boris Johnson misled Parliament, Claire?
Good afternoon, Sangita. Well, just listening to you before, I can tell you do, but I certainly don't. I really do think this whole process lacks credibility. Whichever way you look at it, it's scandalous and it's a slur on our democracy. I've been through the evidence, with a fine-tooth comb over the last few weeks, and I'm just appalled, actually. I really am, that it's actually got to this stage. So, yes, that's why we have been emailing or getting our members to email the MPs, the Conservative MPs, saying, pull out. We don't want you to be any part of this.
Okay, I'm going to come to that in a minute. Can I just come back for a second? You certainly very strong language there. You described the Privileges Committee as a slur on democracy. I would think that they would be quite outraged by that, Claire.
I don't actually care if they're outraged. It really, truly is. I mean,
How can it be a slur on democracy when this is part of our parliamentary process?
Well, when Parliament were asked to vote on this, they didn't actually have all the facts. We know the Sue Gray report has been discredited. We know her advising barrister of that report has been discredited. They've also massively changed the goalposts. I mean, for one, let me just give you one example. Intent. Everyone was told it was all about Boris's intent. Who defines that? What is the intent? What is the intent? Anyone who's even got a basic knowledge of law, everyone who's seen, Blonde Ambition or something, mens rea, you've got to have intent for a crime to be committed. But they've actually changed the goalpost now. And they've said, has he been recklessly misleading? I mean, how on earth that they've managed to get away with that? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Also, you've got to look at the actual context of.
Although, of course, sorry, you've just drawn the parallel with law, and of course, in law, let me take an extreme example: manslaughter. If you're convicted of manslaughter, then that is because you have behaved recklessly. In other words, you may not have had intent, but your behaviour was predictably going to end up in the death of someone. So actually, what you seem to be questioning, Claire, and this is, I've got to be honest, I'm quite taken aback. What you seem to be suggesting is that due process established through our parliamentary systems that has been used time and time and time again, that has never been questioned before, you're describing that as a slur on democracy.
Well,
and you're actually going a step further and suggesting that it should be sabotaged by campaigning, as I understand it, for the 4 Tory MPs that sit on the Privileges Committee to withdraw.
Well, I'm sorry, but with your reasoning, why is the Parliament even looking into this when a higher authority fined Boris for people walking into his office and singing happy birthday to him? He wasn't fined for attending any parties. That, read the facts of that case, and that is a higher authority in the good law of our lands and the way things should be done.
So hang on, are you suggesting that professions, which is let's call being an MP a profession, are you suggesting that employers should never have any internal disciplinary processes? Because that's essentially what this is. So by your reasoning, Claire, no employer in the country, in the world, would ever have an internal disciplinary procedure.
I'm not saying that. I've said
that is what you're saying. You're saying he's already been fined, and therefore there's no reason to have a parliamentary inquiry.
I'm saying if you were an employer in the land, you should go with what the police have said. And the police fined him for a gathering of people walking into his office during the workday. It was a Thursday or Friday afternoon, in between meetings, in his place of work. They were all, employees working during the pandemic in exactly the same way as hospital staff were gathering. I was working in my newspaper
hospital
office at the
staff
time.
Were not having drinks and having parties and puking up on walls and breaking children's swings. And I think, honestly, Claire, nurses and paramedics and doctors listening to you now will be deeply offended by that parallel.
Well, this is another thing. The Sue Gray report at the time wasn't talking about the leadership of Boris. If you check all the dates, Boris wasn't in Downing Street for most of that time. Simon Case, she was talking about Simon Case, the cabinet secretary. He was responsible for the civil servants. And I heard you on the programme before just constantly saying politicians breaking the rule.
No, I didn't say politicians breaking the rules. I reported what has been widely reported to be fact, which is that he was fined along with Rishi Sunak. For attending a
another
birthday
thing.
party, it was a fixed penalty notice that was handed out to him. And I think you know that that's the case, don't you? Because if you're suggesting that isn't true, then I'm sorry, I'm absolutely baffled.
I wrote about it at the time. I actually thought the police should hand him back his fine. He didn't break the rules. As far as things go, it was a place of work. He was an employee working during the pandemic, and it was in between business meetings. And it wasn't a party, as you've said in this programme, and other people
What
have
was it
stated.
then? What was he actually fined for?
He was fined for people walking
For what, just
into his
standing
office.
around? Was he? For doing his job?
Look at the photos.
For walking in between
Sangita,
meetings.
If you think that was a party, you need a bit more of a life, I'm afraid. Look at the actual photos. Also, another.
Have you
big
said that
point
to the
raise
Metropolitan Police, Claire? Have you said
I
to them,
wrote it
you
in an
know
article.
what?
I
You
was
know
very
what?
open about
Cressida
it.
Dick, Mark Rowley, what you need is more of a life rather than conducting a police investigation into the Prime Minister of this country, breaking his own rules. Have you tried that one with them?
Oh, well, I did write about it at the time, and I basically said just that. But another area is...
Hang on a minute. Can I
Rishi.
just go back to the really key thing here? You're campaigning, if I understand this correctly, to get Andy Carter, Alberto Costa, Sir Charles Walker and Sir Bernard Jenkin, all Tory MPs sitting on the Privileges Committee, to withdraw. Is that right?
Yeah, we believe that this investigation is nothing but a politically motivated...
Isn't that
attack against-
anti-democratic, Claire?
No, it's totally. They shouldn't be sitting on this kangaroo court. It's ridiculous.
They should be sitting on it because it is a cross. Hang on a minute. It's a crossbench committee, right? And the reason it is a crossbench committee, and there are 4 Tories on it, so that's the majority of 7. The reason it's crossbench is because we trust our MPs to be able to do the right thing in this process, and that is to lift themselves out of party politics, look at the evidence, and come to a conclusion as to whether or not Boris Johnson knowingly or unknowingly misled Parliament. Are you suggesting these 4 Tory MPs cannot do that?
Well, the greatest lawyer in the land, Lord Panic, who is a global superstar in law, he's ruled that it absolutely shouldn't be happening.
He's being paid for by Boris Johnson to defend him.
Well,
and me and you are paying that, and so all of the taxpayers of this country.
Well, in exactly the same breath then, why isn't Rishi being held to the same account? I mean...
Hang on, just answer the question. Just answer the question. Is it not fundamentally anti-democratic that you are asking 4 Tory MPs to withdraw from the Privileges Committee that is investigating Boris Johnson?
I don't think that's anti-democratic at all. I think it's anti-democratic when
we elect
members of
MPs
Parliament
via a general election to represent our interests, which is what Andy Carter, Alberto Costa, Charles Walker and Bernard Jenkins are doing. Right? Do you agree that they were elected by Tory voters to sit in Parliament, and part of their duties is to sit on this Privileges Committee and to do the right thing?
When Parliament voted for this Privileges Committee, they didn't know all the facts. I've already just been through this.
But they can sift through the evidence, Claire. That's the whole point.
This is it. Let's wait to see what the evidence is on Wednesday.
So then why are you trying to undermine and subvert it by asking them to pull out?
Well, we do know that they've seen a lot of the evidence behind the scenes. They
and
know
it looks
what's going on.
terrible for Boris Johnson, doesn't it?
They know that at the time when they were asked to sit on this Privileges Committee, they weren't in receipt of all the evidence then. So that is, I mean, literally, it is just a kangaroo court. Do you want to have our country being ruled by these sort of things? It's absolutely...
Claire, this is not a kangaroo court. This is a set of MPs who have been democratically elected to sit on a cross-party committee to examine the evidence that will be before them, and they will then reach a conclusion.
Well, also, if you have gone through and done as much research as I have, you will have gone through all the Hansard records. You would have looked at every single little bit of, speech that was said in the Houses of Parliament. Boris was asked specific questions about specific dates.
And he kept changing his story. didn't he?
Absolutely. That is a slur from you.
No, it's not a slur from me. I watched it. I saw it. First he said that he was not aware of any parties. Then he said he'd be outraged if there were some parties. Then it turned out that he'd just been fined by the Met, in fact, and he was at one of these parties. And then he went on to say absolutely he didn't mislead Parliament.
Sangita, that is actually
It's
incorrect.
Sangita, by the way.
I can go through them now. December the 18th.
No, please don't. But listen, you've
you've
made your point very eloquently, Claire. But yes, so listen, my final question to you is the issue is sanctions, right? This is where I have a real problem with it because it would transpire that if he is found guilty of misleading Parliament, then if he is suspended for less than 10 days, he will just walk straight back in on the 10th or 11th day and carry on as usual. If he is suspended for more than 10 days, that might trigger a by-election. But in the end, any of these sanctions will have to be put before Parliament and MPs will vote for it. I think I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What do you think should happen in relation to sanctions?
Do you know what? If he's found guilty, wrongly found guilty, it will in perpetuity it's going to restrict the ability of any MP to answer any question in the Commons from here on in. I mean, we have got to have the right thing done here. I've seen the evidence. The people will see the evidence on Wednesday. Boris did not mislead Parliament. We've been through it with a fine-tooth comb. It really is just a witch hunt from the left, from Labour. I mean,
Can I ask you something? If you believe it's such a witch hunt, if you believe you have evidence that he did not mislead Parliament, what are you scared of?
I'm not scared. I want him back in place.
You are scared because you're trying to dissemble the Parliament. Hang on a minute. You're trying to dissemble the committee by demanding that these 4 Tory MPs pull off it. So you are scared. Right? So what are you scared of? Because you keep saying over and over again in this interview that you've seen evidence that will clear Boris Johnson. Well, then let that evidence be put before the committee. And if you are right, he will be cleared. And if you are wrong, he will be found guilty of misleading Parliament.
I tell you what I'm scared of. I'm scared of socialism getting into number 10. I lived in Los Angeles for the last 14 years before the pandemic. I've seen what happens when you allow socialists in the door. I want a Conservative government. I believe in this Conservative government. And I believe Boris is our true leader. And I do respect Rishi. Of course, I respect Rishi.
OK, let's not talk about Rishi. This isn't about Rishi. Claire Bullivant, but good try, though. Claire Bullivant, editor of Conservative Post. I tell you, you must be the first person to ever come on this programme and called Andy Carter, Alberto Costa, Sir Charles Walker and Sir Bernard Jenkin socialists. Thank you very much indeed for your time.